Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell Killer!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. The final month of the year is upon us. Advent calendars are starting to be popped open and the Tip Sheet counts down its final episodes for the year and season of 2024. Before I introduce my compatriots and co-hosts, a quick shout out that you can like and subscribe us on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, all those platforms. It always does help with the metrics and the algorithms there. And again, before I get to 60s and Quinn, a quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan and Parramatta, being fantastic partners of both the Tip Sheet and TCT. Fellas, big intro there, but I'll get to you now as we crack that first door in the TCT Advent calendar, I suppose. I'll throw it over to you, 60s. What's happening, mate?
Well, firstly, hello to all of our listeners and thank you for joining us. But, fellas, I thought this week, just for something different, I'd pinch an idea from radio that I heard the other week. And it's just a little bit of a fun way to start off our show. What I want you both to do is to imagine that there's someone who's not your greatest fan, maybe someone who might even hate you a little bit, who's decided to write a book about you. What would that title of the book be? So I want you to think about that. Do you want me to start things off with myself?
Let's hear it.
Okay. So there's two possibilities for me. The first one is, will you ever get to the point? And the second one would be verbal diarrhea and what does it sound like? So some regular criticism that I get from people that are relatively close to me as well. So that's actually coming from people who supposedly like me.
Well, you are a self-proclaimed verbose 60s, so yeah. It's probably not surprising. And to be honest, if that's the your poorest quality, then you're doing all right.
I've probably got others, but I'm not going to admit to them on podcast. Okay, your turn now, Clint.
Mine would have to. I think mine's insufferable know-it-alls and why you shouldn't start a fucking conversation with them. And
you've dropped an F-bomb in the middle of it. So we now know that whoever was writing that was passionately writing it.
Oh, very much so. You know, it was good catching up with Dad this morning, actually.
Good old Jerry.
No, look, I think it would be something to that effect because I do consider myself somewhat worldly and I know a little bit about everything, but I'll be the first to admit when I know nothing about anything because I don't like being caught up in something I don't know, and I'll just flat out go, I don't know it. But if you get me on a roll about something, like you 60s, I'm a bit of a verbose, but then I just drop a bunch of unnecessary information in there along with it.
Yeah, I just start off with the unnecessary, mate. It just what are you trying to tell us, mate? Get to the point. John, you can't get out of this, mate.
Yeah, look, if my arch enemy wanted to go and be vicious, there's some pretty legit mean things I could say about me, but if I hypothetically have a rather gentlemanly arch enemy who chose to go the higher ground for the title for me, maybe it's something along the lines of prognostication and procrastination, history's most willing protagonist for minimal short-term gain, knowingly accepting long-term pain.
So we
It speaks for itself, doesn't it, John?
Yeah.
Very
good, mate.
We all clearly talk too much is the theme.
Yes. Yes, I do believe that there could have just been one sort of suit fits all for us, and it's just, shut the hell up.
Yeah, I was going to say, just shut up. Well, maybe we've got some listeners right now that are turning off and going, you know what, we'll take that advice.
We've heard enough. They've said enough this week.
Thankfully, it is a quiet news week, so they're not missing too much if they're going to tune out on this particular podcast.
Look, we do have some news. So, John, hit the cue.
News team, assemble!
Well, fellas, let's kick off with a little bit more signing news, or a little bit of roster news rather than signing news as such, because, gee, the Eels have had a big November, and we've started off December with the news of the extension of Kelma to Alangi. And, boys, that's pretty good news as well, because it's a 1-year extension, so he's signed till the end of 2026. John, your takes?
Yeah, Kelma was really interesting. I know our recruitment drive wasn't exactly massive for the season past. Obviously, Kelma and Morgan Harper were the two incoming recruits. But Kelma, he was derailed by both injury and suspension through the midpoint of the season. But he was really threatening a legitimate breakout season in the back row for the Parramatta Eels, covering both the edges and the middle of the field too. Really like Jason Riles and the Recruitment Retention Committee being aggressive here, getting on the front foot, locking him up in advance now. And it's not a long-term deal, so if he does curtail a bit from here, they can obviously part ways about too much expense long-term. But it's obviously also a sign of confidence in what they saw from him, both on the tape from this season and early stages of the preseason. I still think Kelman's best football is ahead of him. He's big, powerful. He has the means of breaking the game open like a few players do in the NRL. I'm not saying he's going to do it every week, but he possesses the tools to run a good line and be powerful for the point of contact in the front line. And we saw that with him working with Dylan Brown. I really look forward to that continuing next year and now the year after. I can't complain about this extension. Good business. Helps solidify the back row for the Parramatta Eels, which probably is still one of the areas where, if you're looking at external recruitment, I'd say dummy half, back row, and maybe one more body in the back line. That's probably where the Eels might be looking at, but Kelma's obviously a big part of those plans.
Yeah. Clint, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, Kelma's a good extension in my books. I think it's the right length of extension for both the player and the club. He really did start to come into his own, as he suggested there, before 40. Particularly, I think it was his last 6 games. He obviously had that interruption with the injury/suspension that happened either side of that. But I think his last 6 games, some of the stats he was posting, well in excess of 100 meters per game. Even pulled, I think, 200 game to finish the season. And he started to tidy up some of his edge defense as well. Found himself a starter in the last 3 or 4 of his games for season 2024. Looked very likely in those games. So, he's one of those players that has a high ceiling, and you'd really love to see him reach that potential. But consistency is going to continue to plague him until he finds it. So, let's hope that not only that he does find it, but under Coach Jason Riles, we see some of those finer points of his game continue to improve.
Where do you think he fits 60s right now? We got obviously himself, Jack Williams, Bryce Cartwright, Ryan Madison technically too, but I think he's more of a middle forward these days. Matt Dory as well. Sean Lane again has that sort of dual slot versatility, but more of a middle forward, at least what we saw at the back end of season 2024. Is he a starter or an interchange forward for you right now?
That's a tough question, John, because I think there are a number of players who are putting themselves into the mix. I do see Sean Lane and Ryan Madison now as middles rather than being edge players. That might conflict with how Jason Riles sees it, but if I'm looking at having a pack that is a bit more mobile defensively, then I see Madison and Lane as actually very mobile middles as compared to maybe being not quite as mobile on an edge, if that makes sense to you. It's so I think someone like Kelma is in the mix with the likes of Cardi, Jack Williams, Matt Dury, Charlie Geimer as back row options. That's just off the top of the head in terms of the ones that are competing there now. I guess what it then comes down to is I think if I was trying to pick where Jason Riles might go, and this is without seeing any indication of training, right? Let me be clear on that, because there's been nothing in the way of full opposed work. So I've got no idea the preferred positions of some of the players as far as Riles is concerned. I've got no idea whether they're first choice or second choice or whatever the case may be, and maybe Riles necessarily hasn't got that clarified in his mind either. But if I was to try to predict, I'd have Jack Williams and possibly Kelma as the starting back rowers. And then it becomes a battle of, in the interchange, how Riles sees it. Is he just going for straight out mobility there with players who could cover both the edge or middle, and maybe a utility like Joash Papali'i? It's hard to say, because on top of that, you've got Luca Moretti in there, who has great mobility. You got Dan Keir, who became a regular at the end of last season. Plus, you've got some emerging players as well. I mean, it's. I think, as far as the forwards are concerned, there are plenty of options there, and if I'm the club, I'm looking at building depth in terms of some first-grade experience in the three-quarter line before I'm necessarily worried about adding more to the forwards.
Yeah, I think the two priorities are a backup to Brendan Hands.
Yeah,
I think we are skinny at dummy half. Joey Lussick can obviously do a job, and you've got a young guy in Riley Smith who you're hoping can make progression in season 2025. But I think we are probably one dummy half short. Obviously that depends on what they do with Joash Papali'i, but I think he's more of an out-and-out backline utility, or even more of a specialist outside back. So that, and just maybe another outside back for depth or competition in the front line, is probably the priorities for the club. But we have to wait and see, because you play the market as it comes to you, right? Like, you try and force things sometimes, but if a player in a certain position becomes available that you sort of are not flush in, but you're also not weak in, but they are a great player, sometimes you just say, well, best player available, you make the most of it. Who knows? But yeah, good to hear that about Kelma 60s and how he sort of fits into your projection right now without really being influenced by training opposed right now. It's that back row composition, that bench composition, going to be some of the real fascinating battles to play out in the preseason, because how Riles wants to go, configuring it for mobility, for power, for speed, for utility. There are multiple configurations and permutations it can be. You've got wild cards in the sort of outside. You talk about, Charlie Geimer looking to kick on from last year, Luca Moretti, Jordan Samrani, who's a young guy that's come to us that looks like he's cut out of granite. Could be anything if he stays healthy. So there's some options there. Very very interesting stuff. And we'll get to training shortly, 60s, because obviously you can give us a bit more clarity on how things are going. But yeah, good news. I think 1 year for Kelma, chance to really solidify himself at Parramatta. He's still quite young, 24, 25, I think. So he's got his best football ahead of him. This is a good deal for both sides.
Yeah, and the other thing that you pointed out the other week is that it's good business getting these contracts done now, because it doesn't throw it into the mass.
They kick on and they're worth
speculation.
400K more.
Yeah, like you don't want to be doing this during the
It
season.
helps the club a lot on multiple fronts, because it's salary cap clarity for future moves elsewhere. It stops other clubs from getting in and just causing issues with counter negotiations. Like Quint said, if he has a big year, you can easily tack on $250,000 to your contract value per annum. We literally saw it with Ice, where he went from being discarded from the Warriors to being one of the game's premier back rowers in the space of 18 months with his transformation to Parramatta. So that's not to say that Kelma's going to ascend and be one of the game's best back rowers, but he has that potential. And I think what we saw this year, combined with just the reinvigoration of the club with a new coach, new coaching styles, just the overall transformation of the playing roster, I think there's a chance for Kelma to ascend and become a better player.
Yeah, and do you see him now as, because he can play a bit of middle, do you see him as exclusively as a second rower?
Looking at the way our top 30 or whatever top X is right now, top 28 or whatever, I do think that he is a specialist back rower in the confines of what we have. Obviously, in specific game parameters where the injuries or yellow card, 10-minute sim in for other players force him to other positions, he's just fine through the middle, and you could certainly deploy him that way. I just think that the isolation game of him against the opposition half is just too powerful. And we started doing that this year to some effect in the back half of the season. Dylan Brown with him. I think there was a game against the Bulldogs in particular where he was just bullying players, and I think there was another one later in the season. I can't recall off the top of my head, but he essentially averaged double-digit tackle breaks. Not double-digit. He averaged, multiple tackle breaks a game for the back half of the season, barring one game. He was just an absolute handful. He had a line break pretty much every other game. So, yeah, the power of having him isolate up against the opposition half, and even just one-on-one opposition back row at times, it's too good. And I think that he'll be seen as a specialist back rower, assuming, again, this is always the big assumption, and as Ted Lasso likes to say, when you assume you make an ass out of you and me, but that's going to be if he can keep his defensive efficiency upticked healthily. Because I think Jason Riles, coming from that Melbourne and Sydney pedigree there, hitting your metrics defensively is going to be ultra critical to holding your place in the team. Yeah,
and just to give a bit of a reminder about what we're looking at with the pack, these are, I'm just going to quickly run through the players who are in contention for a spot and I'm not going to include dummy halves or anything like that, just the middles and the edges, right? Junior Paulo, Joe Offengawi, Kelma Tuolungi, Jermaine Hopgood, Sean Lane, Ryan Madison, Luca Moretti, Wuramu Greg, Bryce Cartwright, Charlie Geimer, Matt Dury, Dan Keir, and then you've and Jack Williams, right? And then you've got the up and comers, and it is a mix of middles and edges. So the players that I didn't mention before, but who are doing full-time pre-season, Sam Tuivasa, Tony Mattielli, Saxon Pryke, Brock Parker. You've also got Will Latu, Josiah Funa Iuta. Now, the interesting thing is, blokes like Will and Josiah, they're really edge players on the rise, and earmarked for really big futures. And then you've got others who have been kept on by Jason Riles, such as Brock Parker and Tony Mattielli, who are middles, and Saxon Pryke, obviously, he's a rising middle player. But Brock, well, he got the New South Wales Cup Player of the Year, didn't he? As a middle, and Sam, obviously, he's a rising middle player. And then Tony Mattielli. Well, Tony's been in the system for a little while, but he'll be really looking to impress because he's in the top 30, and he's been kept within the club in that top 30. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him going into next season, because he was certainly a player of promise when he first joined into the Eels squad. Fellas, the only other thing that I wanted to add about the signing of Kelma, he joins the recent signings of Matt Dury, Sean Russell, Brendan Hands, as extensions that have been done with Jason Riles. And that means as well that Jason Riles is sending a message to these players that you're a part of my plans going forward, even beyond next year.
Yeah, it's a vote of confidence.
It is a vote of confidence, and he's making those calls after getting a bit of a look at them at training as well. So he's obviously done his research on them prior to the preseason starting, but the deals are being done now, and massive vote of confidence for those players. John, enough of my voice talking. So I'm going to throw to you because SEN has something to say about our pursuit of a dummy half.
Yeah, I caught the report via someone that sent it to me the other day, and it's essentially not much, but I think it was along the lines of that the Parramatta pursuit of Jaden Brayley, if it is to eventuate, it wouldn't happen until early next year at best, post-Christmas break. There was some discussion about the nuances of the salary cap situations for both Newcastle and Parramatta and whatnot. So I don't know if that's going to lead to the Parramatta Eels cooling off a bit, fellas, because when you're instituting a new dummy half, even if it is only, splitting the role between him and Brendan Hands, because he would clearly be working alongside Brendan Hands and not just replacing him, you'd want him here as soon as possible, wouldn't you? So Newcastle, I don't know, they're playing a little bit hard to read here because they've got multiple cap things they're sort of managing between Leo Thompson and Jaden Brayley and whatnot. So I don't know. Maybe it's a watch this space sort of thing. But if I had to guess, it was Carianis, there you go, and Andrew Voss. I found the message here that, Brayley here, if he's going to come here, it'll be early next year because that's how it lines up for the two teams' caps. So, the longer it drags out, the less I believe it'll happen, which is just the nature of a lot of rugby league stuff and signing stuff in general. And it does leave, if that is the case, it does leave the Eels with a situation of, all right, well, who's backing up Brendan Hands? Because as we mentioned, you got Lussick, you got Riley Smith if you want to go for the young guy, but you probably want a little bit more NRL experience inside that top 30.
Clint, gut feel, percentage.
That'll happen?
Yeah, whether it'll happen or not.
Much like 40 suggests that there, with each passing day, it drops. I think it's 60-40, 60% likely it doesn't happen at this point, with percentage dropping by the day. So, Jaden would be an excellent addition to this Eels team if it were to come off. Obviously, he's got some tidy passing service. Passes on the ground in one motion, which is half the battle for a lot of hookers these days. And very, very astute defender. I think he's got a tackle efficiency somewhere in the mid-90s, which and that's not just being second, third man in. That's a lot of front-on tackles, one-on-one tackles as well. That's making up that percentage, and by virtue of leading line speed. So he would be an excellent addition and the right type of addition to our spine if we were to pursue it. However, it's not a move that we should be breaking the bank over. And if talks have broken down, well, we just move on and we reassess what's out there.
The dummy half market's in a bizarre state as well because it's the position that touches the ball the most. Yet it's arguably the most devalued position in the current metagame. If you're not,
it's diminishing, isn't it?
Yeah, if you're not paying a Harry Grant or a Cam Smith or a Robbie Farah, I suppose, if you're going back even longer than that, you're essentially better off just bargain buying, trying to extract maximum value out of the position. And the Eels have a good thing going with Brendan Hands here. He's obviously just extended his stay at the Parramatta Eels, and he's on the ascent as a young dummy half. So getting a complimentary piece to him would be really, really key. But at the same time, it goes back to if you haven't got a Harry Grant, then you sort of cheap out the spot, which is kind of crazy when you think about how important that position is. It leads your defensive line speed, is asked to make the most tackles in a game in the area you need to be the most secure for the middle, or you trust to be the most secure. And offensively, it either calls all the shots if you're that kind of dummy half, or it facilitates the shot calling of your star playmakers with clean service, knowing when to run, when to pass, when to kick as well as the complementary piece there and taking pressure off your 6 and 7. So the fact that it's such a devalued position in the current game is fascinating. I can't really think of something analogous to that in something like the NFL, where quarterbacks and centers, obviously centers are paid nowhere near as much as quarterbacks, but they're not undervalued. They're still getting double-digit US millions a season for the best centers in the competition, whereas here it's the complete opposite. Crazy.
John, I used to scratch my head in wonder when Brian Smith used to turn over the dummy halves at the Eels in his tenure, and we had some almighty talented dummy halves from
Brad Drew, PJ Marsh,
Aaron Raper,
yeah.
Then into all the way through to 2009 with Kevin Kingston, who was only there for the 1 year. But I mean, Brad Drew, he was an absolute match winner when he was there, and yeah, it just seemed like we used to turn them over. Any one of those players that you just mentioned could have been a player that you'd want to see spend the majority of their career at the Eels and guiding the team around. And it just, you'd be lucky to get a couple of years with them on the roster. So, I agree with you. It's often such a devalued position when you think about the role that they play. I guess as well, what it comes down to is you've got all those dummy halves out there that have different skills attributes. There are some that are absolutely dynamic out of dummy half with their running game. There are others who read the play really well and are very good at mixing, taking their own options as well as providing great service for the team. You get others who their focus and and sometimes it completely matches with what the coach wants. Just being able to provide that consistency of service for the halves or the first receivers when the call goes out for which way the play's going. But I think when you're talking about the majority of dummy halves out there, you've got taking us outside of the absolute elite ones. It really does come down to what the coach wants out of his dummy half. And if he just wants that ball to go to, the main call when it's needed and for the consistency of service making the tackles, then it's, it just simply comes down to which dummy half fits into the style of play that the team's going to unleash in a season. And
do you think
would it suit? Riles has made a call straight away with Brendan.
Yeah, exactly. That obviously big validation there for Hands, and it's not a surprise that Riles looks at him and sees value because we've seen his growth across the last 2 seasons. But right now, would you say that he is favoured to play 80 minutes at least for the opening parts of season 2025? Because otherwise, you're looking at again Lussick and Smith. And it's not to say that neither of them couldn't rise to the challenge and secure a spot on the bench, but I do wonder if we're looking at Brendan Hands as an 80-minute option right now.
Well, I've said this before. I've got Joash Papali'i in at 14, and it gives that option for whether he provides a bit of a break for Brendan Hands or even whether he plays that hybrid sort of 13 role now, where he's just a mobile, fast player, putting an extra threat around the ruck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he could probably play both roles. Fellas, the footwork that I've seen from him at training, it
feels like every picture the club's taken of him, he's in the middle of a Benji Marshall sidestep in the sort of air progress portion of it. So he looks like he's a handful.
He's a handful, all right.
The only wrench in that plan 60s is that he might be called to play starting backline for the first 2 rounds.
Well, look, and that's possible.
No Addo-Carr for rounds 1 and 2 means that there is a vacant spot on the wing that needs to be, or wing or centre, depending on how they want to configure the backline. Because Bowie Simonson, if he is available, has the flexibility to play either spot. But yeah, it just yeah, I suppose round 3 onwards, you could definitely make an argument. I mean, even round 1 or 2, because you do have guys like Sean Russell and young guys like Richard Penasini that could absolutely be in contention regardless. But yeah, I think given that Joash is not a recognised dummy half, I just think it is potentially the most concerning hole in our roster right now.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to say to you as well, and I don't want to hype the kid up, there is a touch of Reed Marnie about Riley Smith. And I'm not talking about the way that he plays. What I'm actually talking about is what I'm seeing from him in the preseason. And so I'm relating it to
kicking down the door in terms of the conditioning.
Yeah,
and
yep. And it's not just like conditioning work, because the conditioning is completely different to when Reed came into the Eels squad. Because I think when Reed came in, he was only doing a 6-week preseason. Right back in the day, I think leading into the 2018 season.
Parlay that into a full preseason on the back of the efforts. Yeah.
Yeah, parlayed it into a full preseason, parlayed it into development contract, and parlayed that into an NRL debut. And that all came from like a last-minute offer of 6 weeks preseason. So I don't think he was in the initial plans for the preseason. And as you said, he just kept kicking down the doors.
Well, I hope that Riley can be that guy for us this year, because if he can step up and become the deputy to Brendan Hands, and that is a huge, salary cap relief in terms of just having a young guy step in rather than go to the open market and sign someone, but B, just great to see, an internal system and a young guy make a grab successfully at a big spot inside the, like, not top 30 per se, but like the top 30 as far as players that you want to use. So that'd be awesome.
And just the last thing I want to say on this, and this is really all I want to say in terms of training, because I did have scheduled in this podcast for me to talk about what's been happening at training, but I'll just leave the what's been happening at training to what I have to say about the open training session at Fairfield. What I do want to focus on is, rather than just singling out, say, Riley, at the start of the preseason, the coaches said to me that they had a goal with the young players that were doing this preseason to have a situation where they were setting them up to be successful. So they give them every opportunity to succeed. And what I will say about those players is they are getting every opportunity to succeed, and they look like they belong in the training squad at the moment. The senior players have embraced them. The senior players are talking a lot to them. It's a tremendous learning experience for all of them, and it's not surprising when I say someone like Riley Smith. I get the Reed Marnie vibes just about how he's taken to training. And, as I said, I'm not saying that he's going to be in first grade or anything like that. Like, there is no way I want to put pressure on like that. But all of these young players, they're looking like they belong as part of this group. And and it's still early days in the preseason, where that leads them to in terms of the upcoming season, whether they start in Flegg or New South Wales Cup, whatever the case may be, they're going to be all the better for the experience that they're getting right now. And I think at this point, the goal that the coaches have had to set all these young players up for success, I think they're meeting it at the moment. And, the ball starts to come back into the court of these players themselves, what they make of it. Because there's still a lot of the preseason to go. And then, of course, it's then how do they manifest any of the learning and skills they've picked up into the season next year. Anyway, fellas, look, I'm find myself talking again, and I come back to that book title. But let me just wrap things up about training by saying congratulations to the club, congratulations to the coaches and the players for the open training session at Fairfield on Saturday. It was a great venue. Anyone that's listening to the podcast who was actually out there at the event, I'd love your comments in the replies to the podcast about what you thought of it, because the playing surface, as I wrote in the bumpers up, was superb. The facilities there, I don't think you could ask for more for an open training session. You had the markets there as well. So, look, there was a little bit of a crowd there, but the time I got there for parking, there was plenty of parking. Everyone got to see what was happening out on the training field. And the players, they were put through a full session. And I mean a really full session. I spoke to the coaches and I said, was there anything different that you did as part of this? Because I couldn't see it. I couldn't see anything different to a normal session. They said the only thing that they did was they made sure that they finished the session when they were doing the defence as close to the fans as possible. So they located the drill close enough to the fence that the fans got a really good look at what was happening with the drill, got to experience that. Ryan Madison was trying to pump up the crowd at various times, getting them to show some love for the team. And, but the way the players were able to move around and spend time with every single person in attendance. All the players got around to every person. And, it has to be congratulated, because I think the session probably started a little bit early, a bit before 9 o'clock, went through till pretty close to 11, and the players didn't finish going around until just about midday. So it was a really, really well-staged open training session. I think supporters can look forward to something special. Well, members can look forward to something special on the 14th of December.
And that's great to hear, 60s, and not surprising to see the focus being put so strongly on such a good product for the fans, given what Jason Ross said in that opening interview with the club going months back now, that 25-minute or thereabouts talk with Adam Hawes, I believe it was, wasn't it? Where he sort of put a huge emphasis on that cultural aspect of the fans. And as someone who's been living vicariously through your training reports and also on the Eels socials, there's been some interesting stuff happening at training, mate. I think the club has revealed Mitchell Moses back at training ahead of schedule. And so we obviously got a very hungry number 7 here and prospective captain looking to help lead this team into a new era, which is great to see. But someone at the club, I don't know if it's Blair Mills, Jason Rolls, is also a fan of the Tour de France, because I'm spotting some different jerseys there that look like they're straight out of the tour. And also some great pictures of Gaz, who looks like could still do a run in the centres as the backline consultant there for the Parramatta Eels. So very, very interesting stuff happening on the Eels Instagram there.
Yeah, I mean, Clint, how did you feel when Mark Gasnier was named as being a specialist coach at the club?
Big Kev excited.
I loved him as an analyst on Fox. I always thought he had great insight into the game.
He also seemed to have a bit of a soft spot for the Eels.
He definitely had a soft spot for the Eels, yeah. He was, in our darker times there, he was very kind towards us. I don't know if there's
much an advocate.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a familial connection there. Obviously, Gasnier's in St. George, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if there's a familial tie there or something like that, but he was always nice to us. And I don't know why he disappeared from the Fox crew like he did for the last few years, but I did feel he was a big loss, because in terms of being an actual analyst,
agreed,
he actually offered some great insight into the game. So I think that's a great add to the, as we joked, boys, the St. Parra Illawarra coaching rank. But yeah, I really like that. Really, really happy to see Moses back too. I mean, that's just a guy that is hungry, isn't it? He's coming off the biggest, even with injuries, the biggest year in his individual history, after taking New South Wales to a series victory, and then helping Australia claim the Pacific Championship. So great to see him back. But yeah, the jerseys definitely stand out to me though. because you've got the red polka dots. There's the white jersey, the yellow jersey, the green jersey. They've been spotted there on social. So there's obviously some sort of like training initiative there going on, which is great to see because they're incentivizing the best performers to sort of step up and stand out.
Yeah, I think the club's going to give a little bit of information out soon. Maybe it might be something that Jason Riles does in talking about those awards or recognition jerseys that they're wearing at training. I'll leave that to the club to talk about, because I think coming from the head coach and talking about the rationale behind it and that sort of thing that'll be great media content. So I think that just about wraps up the training news. And before we get to your interval music, mate, and we get to the NRL news, unfortunately, we have to pass on a little bit of sad news. And there's, one of the Eels' great club men, unfortunately, has just passed away. His name is Graham Parry. Graham would be especially well known to any of anyone that's been involved with the junior representative teams. He's, the people who give their time to the club like Graham always did. They're the lifeblood of a club. They're the selfless people who are just love and are as passionate about the team as anyone could possibly be. We got to know Graham obviously through our coverage of the junior representative teams. We want to pass on our condolences to his family. We're thinking of them, and there's one thing that I will say as tribute to Graham, and that's go you mighty Eels.
Yeah, well said, mate. It is always unfortunate to sort of segue from a segment like that where you've lost a club great. So we move on into the intermission. And for me personally, boys, I am on the road this weekend on a bit of good news, off to see the sister, have a bit of a pre-Christmas catch-up to celebrate my, I suppose it's my birthday too, but mostly my nephew's birthday, because no one really gives a shit about your birthday after you're 21. So off to celebrate the young nephew's birthday and catch up with sister. So taking the old man on a road trip down to Melbourne, which in the sort of holiday spirit naturally meant that there's only one really fitting road song. And this is a bit of a holiday classic. Obviously, not going to be expecting to go up to National Lampoon's Escapades, but a great road trip song nonetheless.
You're not visiting Wally World? I'm disappointed.
No, he's visiting Bellyache World. Now, John, you have to make a little visit to try and get into Storm training, give a bit of feedback about what's going on there in the lead up to round one.
Maybe some Moses like balaclava and crowbars, perhaps.
We're not going to suggest that you kneecap certain players or anything like that. Just get some mail on what's going on down there. So we'll leave that in your capable hands, mate. But we do have some NRL news to go through, and let's lead off with some huge coaching news, which is that Laurie Daly has been appointed the Blues coach with Craig Bellamy as his coaching advisor. Clint, I'm going to throw to you first for what you think about that appointment.
It seems like a lot of things in this world, everything that is old is new again.
What year is it?
An absolute 180 when you consider 5-6 years ago. He had, it felt like he'd burnt that bridge completely. I think it was his last series, coaching against Kevin Walters, where Laurie Daly had a on paper, and we know Origin's not played on paper, but on paper, a much stronger squad than what the Queensland team were fielding, and came up with not all that much. But in the eyes of the powers that be at New South Wales Rugby League, Laurie Daly is the successor. Again, he gets a second shot at it, and you hope that second chance comes with a lot of learnings from the first opportunity, because there should very well be some. The fact that there's some other appointments around him suggests that they're bringing in some different perspectives, and to obviously help keep Laurie's, I guess, opinions and view of the squad as neutral as possible, and ensure that there is some other voices being heard in the room.
Yeah, John?
I'm not a huge advocate of the selection. I think that Laurie Daly's only serious success was pretty much solely due to the Dally M form of Jared Hayne back in 2014, because that was the series he won, right? Josh Reynolds and Trent Hodgkinson in the halves, Jared Hayne at fullback at the peak of his powers. I would have gone a different direction. I would have taken a risk on someone else, even if it was someone that is relatively unproven. They had a few names up there like Michael Ennis and whatnot. I would have taken the shot on someone like that, even if it was a bigger risk. This is the quote-unquote safe option. I'll be interested to see how much Craig Bellamy has to give to this, because his failed stint in State of Origin, I imagine, would still burn. But at the same token, he, as much as he keeps grumbling and whispering that he's going to move on from the Storm, he is heart and soul committed to them still. So how's that going to play out for him in an advisory role? I don't know. I would install Queensland as reasonable favourites right now. I know that New South Wales have the better team. I still think they've got the better team, but I think that Queensland probably have the better coaching setup right now.
Yeah, interesting take. I mean, Laurie's been really a media person now, for
not even media. He's been a betting guy.
Yeah. He's got the gig on Sky Sports Radio. I think that's the 2KY, the old 2KY is now referred to. But it's interesting, that Back to the Future, and as you say, safe bet that they're playing. I mean, whether it's something that can take the New South Wales team forward, I guess the proof will be in the pudding there. Look, I mean, you've got a great advisor in Craig Bellamy, in terms of coaches in the NRL coaches. There's few that are better than Craig Bellamy, and you hope that there's lessons that have been learned from before, and I guess he's going to keep that passion there for the Blues, and the support staff. I'd like to think that they'll also help to get that job done for New South Wales. I'm going to sit on the fence, John, right now. I'm not going to be dark and gloomy about Queensland will get the better of us now. I'm going to wait till the team is selected, because I think the job of that coach at New South Wales level is really to get the players to bond as well as they can, to play to the best of their individual skills, and to come up with some absolute just basics of football, because that talent is going to take them a long way. It's a completely different gig to having a weekly NRL gig. I don't think you need to be a weekly NRL coach to be an Origin coach. I think it helps that you've probably spent some time there, but because I don't think people necessarily go the other way. I think if you've had a good record as a Blues or Origin coach, doesn't mean you necessarily got what it takes to be a premiership winning NRL coach. So different do I see the roles of a representative team coach and a club coach. So anyway, we do move on now with other representative team news. John Strange, who is the Roosters NRLW coach, has been appointed as the Blues women's Origin coach. And Johnny's got some connections there within the rugby league in general, John Strange.
Yes, he's got a pair of very talented children making waves in both the NRL and NRLW. One of the breakout rookies of season 2024, obviously Ethan Strange in the nation's capital, where he starred in the halves alongside Jamal Fogarty, and then who was the other young guy that had breakout there from Manly? It's slipped my name, but Ethan did really well in the halves there. Has also played in the centres as a young guy, so it was not interesting. It was cool to see him make that jump into the most difficult position in the game in first grade. And in the NRLW, Jasmine Strange, who is with her father at the Roosters and under the in the same team, as John, domestically or in the domestic competition, has a chance to impress her father for selection in the New South Wales squad now. So good appointment, I think. I think John's got a pretty good rep in the coaching circles. So this one is certainly meritorious, and hopefully he can keep the Blues on top in that cauldron of state of origin for the women.
Yeah, KO Weeks, I think, was the player.
KO Weeks, that's the one. Yeah, was it Manly, and then went to Newcastle. Sorry, went to Canberra and had a huge breakout season.
Yeah, Clint, your thoughts on that? Because I mean, John Strange he's had some very strong Roosters outfits over the years, but he's probably got the runs on the board in terms of knowledge of the players that he'll be working with and the coaching credentials. So do you see it as a good appointment for the Blues Origin team?
Like a hand or a glove. If it fits, you must have quit. It's kind of the joke that came to mind there. Not that I'm suggesting a connection between those events, but I say that I say that tongue in cheek because it is a very natural fit that John Strange assumes this position. Yes, we've made jokes throughout the years about the strength of the Roosters NRLW team, but you still have to get them to perform. And John's been front and center of that. He's someone that's been involved in the women's game for a number of years now. So he seems like the right appointment for the position.
Yeah, well, let me throw now the next bit of signing news to you, which is Dan Atkinson from the Sharks. He's linked with the Dragons, but it's not for 2025. It's from 2026 onwards.
Well, it's for 2026 onwards for now. As the cynic in all of us knows that that signing that is for the season after next can very quickly become for this coming season, especially given that Atkinson's probably going to be playing a spine position for the... Well, I say that, but they've also just recruited Ilias, so there's going to be a competition for spots there. This is for the Dragons. This is a good signing. I thought Atkinson was a very solid part of that Cronulla setup this year. Has the flexibility to play across the entire back line, including the halves. Young, he's got 20-something NRL caps to his name now. So, yeah, this is a good pickup for them, pending what they're paying, because who knows the play market these days? They can spiral out of control very quickly.
Well, Clint, I think it's a signing the Sharks had to make. The Dragons had to make. We were talking last week about how they stood in terms of what it looked like their halves pairing was going to be next year, with Flanagan and Ilias perhaps being the first choice. They've now introduced some competition. into the battle for the halves, that's a positive for them.
Very much so. You know, this is a shrewd investment from the Dragons because they're getting him at a point in time where he's not going to cost them the world. I mean, given he's only played 20 NRL games, a lot of people look at 3-year deal, $500K per year as a big investment. But it's also one of those things. You know, he's a player with pedigree, and he's shown some skills, some really likely signs that show that maybe in the second or third year, that investment will be absolute unders. So, you know, there's a lot to like about Atkinson and the way that he plays. He's been a very strong player in the New South Wales Cup in his performances there for a few seasons now. One of those guys that played New South Wales Cup when he's still been flag eligible. So, there is an NRL player there for certain, and he's another guy that I look at that has a pretty decent ceiling. And I kind of liken him. You know, there's a little bit of irony in this. I kind of liken him to the position and being in the position that Nico Hines was in when he was in at Melbourne, in that there was a player there who was worth more and deserved a starting spot at another club, wasn't going to get it at his incumbent club, and if someone was willing to pay a little bit above what his current value is, with the view that in a year or two they're probably going to be worth a lot more, they're going to get someone for tremendous value over the course of a contract. I look at Dan Atkinson as a player being in a very similar position to what Nico was, you know, 5 or so years ago at Melbourne.
Do you know what? I think this sign, and I think maybe I'm overstating it, but I think this signing can move the Dragons away from competing for the spoon. Now, as much as there'll be Dragon supporters that if they heard this, they're going to be scoffing at the suggestion that they would be competing for the spoon, seeing as though Flanagan got some significant improvement out of them in the 2024 season. But, you know, I looked at the loss of Ben Hunt, the likelihood of what the halves would be next season, and with all respect to Clint Gutherson as a recruit, I was looking at the spine and thinking, I don't know. But I think he's got enough talent that they've added something significant, I think, to their spine, and maybe that's exactly what they needed to kick on with the improvement that they made last year. So well done to the Dragons for that signing. John, the Titans are set to lose a young forward.
Yeah, this one's interesting. Story came out midway through this week. Josiah Pahulu, who I think played most of the season for the Gold Coast Titans. Let me just quickly pull him up and make sure I'm not BSing you guys. Josiah Pahulu, who is a 20-year-old forward, 184 centimetres, played 19 appearances this year. I believe he hit certain, and this is what always the danger of incentive-laden contracts, fellas. I believe he hit certain performance metrics, certain KPIs that entitled him to a plus payout on his contract, maybe in I think it's the vicinity of like $50,000 between like the caps, the meterage, and whatnot. And
the good old contract triggers.
Yes, the old contract triggers, and I don't think the Titans can or plan to pay him, which would be a breach of contract terms, which would render him a free agent. And the media gossip seems to be that the Bulldogs are circling, and Lord knows the Bulldogs have been linked to every forward possible but haven't been able to land a significant acquisition. And in saying that, they are deeply mired in the chase for Leo Thompson from Newcastle, but Pahulu has been linked to them and would be a pretty nifty acquisition at just 20 years of age. So interesting one to watch because we haven't seen sort of a fizzle-out KPI-ish situation for a long time, because usually those things are just pretty much watertight, ironclad, built into the, you know, it's state of origin stuff, it's, you know, certain games, and we have seen in the past players getting, this is a long time ago now, but players getting sat and missing out on hitting certain cap or appearance benchmarks, but that's an era gone past, I think. So yeah, this is.
I was going to say all of that was nothing new. I mean, I know of those sorts of issues happening way back in the early 70s.
Yes, through 70s, 80s, 90s, it was definitely an issue, which would cause understandable frustration on the player side because they're missing out on really significant contract milestones. But it's something that sort of faded into the background until now. So this is definitely an interesting one to monitor. The Titans obviously also picking up Reagan Campbell-Gillard have also blocked a young props path like Josiah's here. So you can see why Canterbury and maybe other clubs are lurking in the peripheral here to try and pick up a young forward.
Clint, if you were a young forward in this bloke's position, you'd want out as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the window and opportunity to first grade is a lot harder than what it was 12 months ago for him. And you know, if you're a player on the rise and you've played a handful of NRL games, you've showed some potential, and there's other clubs that are interested in you, and you're presented with that situation, it's only natural that you want out. But as we've seen over the last couple of seasons, a lot of clubs holding onto their players for the length of their contract and not being agitated into early releases by player managers or the players themselves. So you'd imagine that the Titans will hold firm unless there's some type of salary cap benefit for them in releasing him.
Yeah. Now, Clint, I'm going to stay with you for a bit of NRLW news that had broken when we recorded last week, but we didn't get to chat about it. So I'm just going to start with a simple question. Have the Broncos immediately become title favourites with the return of Tamika Upton to their ranks?
It's a Man City-esque transfer. This, there has to be some type of oil money in with the with the Broncos NRLW team, because adding her to an already relatively stacked side seems impossible, if not improbable. Yet they've done it, and you'd almost think the betting market is closed on odds for them to win the premiership.
And John, conversely, how would you place odds on the Newcastle Knights without Tamika Upton?
Yeah, what a mountainous swing, isn't it? One team gains massively and the other team loses its heart and soul. This is not good for Newcastle. And that's not to say they can't show some resiliency and sort of rally. You know, I wouldn't call it subtraction by addition when you lose a player of Upton's caliber, legitimately best player in the competition sort of stuff. But if they are going to be competitive next year, it's going to be a huge team effort because Lord knows she is a gaping hole in their roster. Phenomenal talent, the definition of a big game player. I think it pretty much rockets the Broncos into premiership favoritism. They are going to be a very difficult team to beat next year. And for Newcastle, it could be a long season.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up perfectly. I don't think there's anything I can add to that. And finally, fellas, it's not exactly rugby league playing news, but Fatty Vorton has officially unplugged the microphone. Now, I'm going to be honest, I thought he'd already done that.
I think most people had, yeah. He dialed down his Channel 9 responsibilities and had sort of stepped away from the footy show from commentary. But apparently he was still calling some Queensland stuff, as Quint informed us.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not saying that disrespectfully.
No, of course
with
not.
Fatty, but you know, it was just surprised that it was news headlines this week because, yeah, I think many of us thought that he'd finished up with those sorts of duties some time back. Clint, when you look back at someone who's been one of the legendary Origin players, someone who put in a freak coaching performance during the Super League era in coaching the Queensland team to a series win when all the players from the Queensland team had linked with Super League, and yet they won the Australian Rugby League State of Origin series. He had achievements there. I thought the footy show when he and Sterlo were both part of it was compulsory viewing. It probably dipped when Sterlo left, because I think he and Fatty Vaughton were good foils for each other, and it started to lose a little bit of relevance when Sterlo departed. Although you could argue Matty Johns was an entertaining component of the show when he was there. But how will you look back on Fatty Vaughton? Are you looking back at Fatty Vaughton the player, Fatty Vaughton the media personality? What's your main memories going to be about the red-headed Marvel Vaughton?
All of those things, 60s. Look, Fatty is probably one of the great Australians. And people might think I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek there, but I'll explain myself. He is a prime example of squeezing every little bit of juice out of the lemon. He's your quintessential Aussie battler who not only made something of himself in one area of expertise, in being in rugby league as a player and then as a coach, but then as an entertainer. But although be it through rugby league as a medium to that career in entertainment, he succeeded in multiple fields. To be the number one show for many years on end on one of the most iconic free-to-air stations in the country. It's quite incredible when you consider his humble beginnings. And in his own words, he was someone that didn't have that much. I think he's underselling himself a bit there, because he had a great ability to connect with the common man. He was a very I say it as though he's not with us. He is a very genuine man, and he is very what you see is what you get, and he resonates with people. And to answer your question, he probably resonates with me more as the entertainer, as the guy that I tune in and see on my TV on a Thursday night, because his playing career was coming to an end as my life was coming to a start. But that being said, I still recognise his football achievements as well as his as you said, his free coaching achievement with that. Also ran Queensland team that was anything but also ran by the end of the series. Just really like it's one of the great Aussie stories, Paul Vaughton. He really did just squeeze every bit of juice out of the lemon, achieved a lot of success, and he's remained himself and humble throughout it. An incredibly likable guy, incredibly likable character. And even when he's having a little bit of fun and maybe saying some of those cringy pro and biased Queensland one-liners, you can't help but have a chuckle to yourself, knowing who the guy is behind the microphone.
Yeah, he was a long way from being anywhere near the biggest forward in the game. He wasn't the fastest forward in the game. He, as you said, squeezed the lemon dry because you knew he was out there in the game. He was one of the first selected for Queensland as a player. So look, I have a memory of him, and it was coming down Victoria Road towards the stadium at Parramatta. So this is going back when it was Parramatta Stadium and not Combank or Bank West. And Fatty was in a vehicle, and I think it was a convertible of some sort. It might have been like a Jeep or something like that. But he could be seen by everyone. And, of course, people are walking down to the ground. They're in the cars around him, and everyone's yelling out to him. Mate, he was enjoying it. He was giving everyone a wave and a smile and, a quick call out and all that sort of stuff. And I thought exactly what you said there, Clint. He was a player that it was a personality that resonated with people. So that'll be something that I'll take from him or remember him by, in terms of being an active participant in rugby league. Because as you said, he's still with us. But in terms of his official duties as a player or a commentator, that's all now come to an end. John, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, it feels kind of surreal talking about how different of an era of TV it was when he was on Channel 9 calling the game and hosting the footy show. Because that's the reality, is it? It is so far removed from the current product, isn't it? But in many ways, it was arguably Channel 9's greatest ever commentary lineup. Ray Warren in his prime, Peter Stilling as the colour guy, providing tremendous insight. Obviously Vorton part of that as the sort of 2IC or the alternate commentator there. Really, really great stuff as far as the sort of Friday night, Sunday football is concerned. But the footy show also a staple of the Thursday night for a lot of Australian homes for a long time. Probably Australia's best take on the American-style panel like TV program, even if it was for Sporting Twist. They did a great job there. The Chief, Sterlo, Fatty, Matty Johns, all the different players they had on there. The stupid contest they do. I think we were razzing someone about it before, Nathan Brown, with the when we sat down with him recently about the chilies that they ate on the show that one time. The anti-ads, all the little skits they did. There was legitimate magic in the formula they had for a long, long time. So a huge staple of, me growing up as part of not just rugby league, but, nighttime TV there on Thursdays. And he had his scares too. I remember that one time he was doing a skit and he fell out in a fat suit, I think it was, out of a truck and got a really bad concussion. And that was before we really understood how bad concussions could be. And it turned out it was pretty nasty. So the fact that after all the football and, all the silly stuff that in the footy show, he's able to hang up his mic safely is obviously a massive boon. And I imagine there's a legitimate case for him to be part as a, he's got the playing resume and the coaching resume there, but also as the commentator, there might be an eventual Hall of Fame calling for him for his contributions to the game.
Well, the playing, the commentating, that coaching achievement with Origin that was against the odds. I mean, if apart from the fact that he loves Manly and loves
Queensland.
I mean,
you got to they're like besmirchments on the record, but the net balance of things. He is again. It's hard to tell part of rugby league story without him involved in it. So I think that's the criteria, and he's been a huge part of the fabric of rugby league in multiple phases as a player, as a coach, and as a member of the media.
Yeah, absolutely. So, fellas, that just about wraps up this podcast. John, you've got your trip down to Melbourne coming up on Friday.
Yep, up early and hitting the road.
And enjoy that. Make sure you get all the mail for us on what's happening down in Melbourne. And Clint, again, thank you for your contributions tonight. How do we come in time-wise, John?
Hour 12 as we record right now. So a very crisp and clean podcast by our standards.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very solid. So again, thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta. And we're still keeping these weekly podcasts going. Whenever there's news, we're going to make sure that it's brought to you by the Cumberland Throw. And as I always say, go you mighty Eels.